Pirkei Eliezer, Perek Lamed Ches. We're holding in the middle of the Perek. We just spoke about Shimon and Levi taking over the city of Shechem and then subduing all the surrounding nations, that they weren't going to fight Bnei Yaakov, even though Yaakov Avinu was scared that they would, but they didn't in the end. And now Yaakov Avinu is finally on his way home and he's going to go back to his parents' house, or at least to Yitzchak's house. His mother Rivka had already died, and we're going to see what happens at that point. Says the Medrash, V'lokach Yaakov Banov uvnei Vanov v'noshav. Yaakov Avinu took his sons and his grandsons and his wives. Now the Mefarshim speak out over here that it's not supposed to say Bnei Vanov because we don't have any proof that Yaakov Avinu had any grandchildren at this point yet. So they say that instead of saying Bnei Vanov, it should say Bnei Esau. That's what the Radal says. And also the Marzu says this. Fine. So Yaakov, his sons and his daughters and his wives came. He took them v'halach, and he went Kiryas Arba Eitzel Yitzchak Aviv, to the city of Kiryas Arba, which is Hebron, where his father Yitzchak was living. Motza sham es Eisav ve'es Nashav Yeshvim ba'el Yitzchak. And what did Yaakov Avinu find there? He found Eisav and Eisav's wives living in Yitzchak Avinu's tent. Meaning he found that Eisav and Eisav's family was living with their father Yitzchak. By the way, it says Eisav and his wives. Biblical trivia. Do you know how many wives Eisav had? It's a little bit of a trick question.
350.
So the answer is 3, 4, 5, or 6. Because the Psukim and Parshas tell us that Eisav had 3 wives. They give us the names of 3 different wives of Eisav, and Parshas told us. And then later on in Parshas Vayishlach, when it's talking about the descendants of Eisav, so it says the names of Eisav's 3 wives, but it's a different 3 names. So the shaila is how to reconcile the 3 names of Toldos with the 3 names of Vayishlach. So Rashi goes with the Mahalach that it's the same 3 people mentioned. For whatever reasons, they're mentioned with the different names. So Rashi says it's 3 wives. Rav Avram ben Arambam in his Pirush on Chumash says that no, it's the 3 wives of Parshas told us in addition to the 3 wives in Vayishlach. So Eisav had a total of 6 wives. And then other Mefarshim say some were the same, some weren't the same, so it'll come out to 4 or 5. The Ramban says whatever. So you have either 3, 4, 5, or 6.
They bring the Cheshbon. Why they believe one of them is the same?
Yeah, they make Cheshbon as exactly which names are the same, which ones aren't the same. So the answer is Eisav had 3, 4, 5, or 6 wives. So Yaakov Avinu comes to Kiryas Arba, to where his father lived, and he sees Eisav there. So what did Yaakov Avinu do? V'noto oholoi chutzoloi. And Yaakov Avinu pitched his tent outside of the tent of Yitzchak. I guess probably because he didn't want to be mischaber with Eisav. He didn't want to mamish join up with Eisav. But he wanted to go to his family, so he set up his family like right next to Yitzchak Avinu's family. Says the Medrash, V'ra Yitzchak es Yaakov es Noshav es Banov es Bnei Esav es Kol Asher Loi. Yitzchak saw Yaakov and his wives and his children and his daughters and everything that he had. Interestingly, here it says wives before it says sons and daughters, and before it said sons and daughters before wives. I'm not sure why I did that. So Yitzchak saw all of this that Yaakov Avinu had. V'samach b'liboy ma'oid, and Yitzchak was very happy in his heart. V'alav hakasav omer, and about this period of Yaakov Avinu returning to the household of Yitzchak, this whole family, the pasuk says, "Urei vanim levanecha, shalom al Yisrael." When you see sons to your sons, shalom al Yisrael, there's peace upon Yisrael. And the Radal explains that this is the Medrash means that. We saw earlier before, I think it was Perek Lamed Hey, when Yaakov Avinu was by the Sulam in Beis El, so he promised Hashem, if Hashem does everything nice for me, V'shavti v'shalom el Beis Avi, and I return in peace to the house of my forefathers, of my father, so then I'll break karbanos for you, and this will be a Beis Elikim, etc. Right? So this is the fulfillment of Yaakov Avinu's tefillah. Yaakov Avinu davened that he should return peacefully to his father's house, and now Yaakov Avinu has finally returned peacefully to his father's house. What? The Radal in the Hysofos makes an interesting point over here. Our Medrash over here is saying that when Yaakov Avinu came to Kiryas Arba, to where Yitzchak lived, so there he met Eisav, and Eisav was living over there with Yitzchak. The shaila is in the beginning of Parshas Vayishlach. It says in the pasuk, "Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefonov el Eisav achiv." Yaakov sent messengers to his brother Eisav, Artza Seir stay Edom, to the land of Seir, with the plain of Edom. So that sounds like when Yaakov sent the message to Eisav, where was Eisav? Not in Kiryas Arba, in Artza stay Edom, in Artza Seir, in the land of Seir, in the stay Edom. Edom is a land that's sort of southwest of Eretz Yisrael. So why is it saying over here in the Medrash that Yaakov Avinu bumped into Eisav by Yitzchak's house? Eisav wasn't really living there. So the Radal says you have to say apparently the Ramban or Chumash says this. I didn't have a chance to look at the Ramban, but the Ramban or Chumash basically says that really Eisav was living in Eretz Canaan, like the Medrash over here says that Eisav was living with his father, right, with his extended family. Why did Yaakov have to send messengers to Seir, to stay Edom? Because Eisav had his own holdings over there in Edom, in Seir, in Edom. He had some sort of investments or some interests over there, and he was for some reason over there at that point. So Yaakov sent the messengers over there. But Be'etzem, Eisav was living by Yitzchak Avinu in Kiryas Arba in Hebron. Another Radal brings in Sefer Yosher. It says a slightly different pshat. It says that Eisav lived a similar idea, but slightly different. It sounds like Eisav lived in Hebron by his father's family or whatever, but he went once hunting to go to Seir, and he ended up staying in Seir for a while. So because he was staying during that while when he was in Seir, that's when Yaakov sent messengers to him. So it's a shiloh here, exactly where did Eisav live at the point. But the Pashta says that he lived in Eretz Canaan. We'll see later on when he moved to his own land, to Har Seir, to Edom. Right, let's do the Medrash weiter. Rabbi Levi says, B'shas asifosei shel Yitzchak, at the time that Yitzchak was going to die, was about to die, Hiniach es miknehu ve'es kinyonoi ve'es kol asher loi l'shnei vanov. He left over his flock and all his possessions and everything that he had to his two sons. L'fichach gamlu lei chesed shneim. Therefore, when Yitzchak Avinu died, so both of his sons were going to chesed him. Both of his sons were busied themselves in helping bury him and taking care of it. They both took care of his estate. Shneimar says in the pasuk, "Vayikberu Eisav v'Yaakov banov," and Eisav and Yaakov, his sons, buried him. So you see that both Eisav and Yaakov were involved in the burying of Yitzchak. The mashmos of the Mefarshim say what's the point over here? The point is that it's saying that because Yitzchak left over his property to both of his sons, to Yaakov and Eisav, therefore both of them were involved in his burial, right? But if, let's say, Yitzchak would have written in his will that he's giving everything to Yaakov Avinu, and Eisav was such a rasha, he wouldn't want to have anything to do with his father's burial. But because Yitzchak left over something for both of his sons, so they both took part of it. But of course, Yaakov Avinu, the Rabbi Yomi Israel points out that Yaakov Avinu l'chora, even if Yitzchak didn't leave anything for him, would have been metapel in his father's burial.
I have to say it.
What?
You don't have to say that.
Why? No, it didn't happen. But like Lu Yitzur, that it would have happened.
It's an obvious account.
Right. And the Radal points out another nukuda that the Medrash is trying to tell us that this is different than what happened with Avram Avinu, because by Avram Avinu sent off Bnei Keturah, and Avram Avinu disinherited Yishmael, and everything that Avram Avinu went, right, everything that Avram Avinu owned, he gave over to Yitzchak. Kol asher loi. Masha'en came over here by Yitzchak gave over both to Yaakov and Esau, but by Avram Avinu not. They say a word that there's a slight difference between the bechira of Yitzchak over Yishmael and the bechira of Yaakov over Esau, because it says in the pasuk, "Kivi Yitzchak yikar l'chosh zora."
Even we don't like to hear it, but his Rivka's son.
Yeah,
Different
it's
than
Rivka's son.
Hagar.
It's different. It's a different dynamic. The difference between Yitzchak and Ishmael is not the same as the difference between Yaakov and Esau.
Yeah.
And the Sfarim said, Esau had the potential to be one of the Avos, and he ruined it. It's like Esau was in a different league than Ishmael. But on the other hand, Esau was much worse.
Yeah.
The Averas that Esau did are much worse than the Averas that Ishmael did. Just before we get to the story of exactly what happened between Yaakov and Eisav when Yitzchak died, just to point out an important nukuda, an important point that the Zayis Ranan mentions over here. The Zayis Ranan on Yalkut Shemoni Remez Kuflam and Ches. Now we're discussing this story over here in the context of Yaakov arriving in Eretz Canaan and arriving in Kiryas Arba, and then we're saying that like when Yitzchak died, so he left over property to both Yaakov and Eisav, and we'll speak about exactly how they split it up. But the next story that we're going to speak about, Be'ezer Hashem, not this week but next week, is going to be the story of the sale of Yosef and the Yidden going down to Mitzrayim, etc. Now, the MS is that Yitzchak Avinu died after the story of the sale of Yosef. Yitzchak was still alive when Yosef was sold, which is going to be later. Right? We didn't discuss the story of Yosef yet. We didn't start that. But we're talking about Yitzchak dying. But Yitzchak dying is not happening now. It's really going to happen after Yosef is sold. Just to make a quick cheshbon, it says that Yaakov was 147 years old when he died. Yeah. And he lived in let's like this. Yitzchak Avinu was 180 years old when he died. Yeah. That means that, and the pasuk says that Yitzchak was 60 years old when he gave birth to Yaakov. Yeah? So 180 minus 60 is 120. So that means that Yaakov Avinu was 120 years old when Yitzchak died. Right? Because Yitzchak was 60 years older than him. Right? Now, Yaakov Avinu himself only lived for 147 years. So 27 years before Yaakov Avinu died, Yitzchak died. And we know that of those 27 years, 17 years Yaakov Avinu spent in Mitzrayim. Shvas Vaychi Yaakov Shvas Shana. Right? That's the beginning of Parshas Vaychi. So that means there's 10 years left. So 10 years before Yaakov Avinu came down to Mitzrayim was when Yitzchak died. Right? 10 years before Yaakov Avinu came down to Mitzrayim, Yosef was already there in Mitzrayim, because Yosef was in Mitzrayim for 22 years before Yaakov came. Right, so this is like 12 years after Yitzchak died, 12 years after Yosef was sold. So what are we saying over here? Why are we bringing this story first? So the Zayis Ranan says two truths. Either you could say that Ein Muktim U'Mocher B'Torah, and Kol Shekin in the Medrash. We're not going in order. We're not going in chronological order. First, we want to finish speaking about Yitzchak, and then we'll move on to the next stories, even though this story technically happened after the next story. That's one nukuda. The other nukuda, the Zayis Ranan says, is that really we're not really talking about Yitzchak dying. Actually, we're talking about, because of the fact that Yitzchak became blind, and a blind man is like he's a dead man. So Yaakov and Esau felt that there was a need to already inherit his property while he was still technically alive. But because he was dead, he was considered as if he wasn't. Because he was blind, it was considered as if he was dead. So that's why we discuss it over here. Okay. So what's the story between Yaakov and Esau? Omar Esau leYaakov. Esau says to Yaakov, Nachlaik kol ma she'iniach lanu Abba l'shnei chalakim. Let's split everything that our father left to us in two parts. Now, the emes like this. Usually, in normal circumstances, when a person has two sons and he dies, so how do you split the property? You take everything that the guy owns and you split it in three, right? And the oldest son gets two of those portions, and the other one gets one portion. That's how Ba'etzem it should go, right? So here, Eisav is saying, no, let's take all of our father's property, split it into two. You split the property, v'ani boyer shani b'char, and I'll choose which one of the two options, because I'm the b'char. So Eisav is doing a little shtick over here. Eisav is admitting that he doesn't get double. because he sold his firstborn rights to Yaakov Avinu. So he's like admitting that he doesn't get double, but he's saying that you don't get double either. I don't get double because I sold the rights, but you don't get double because you're not really the Bukhar. You're just like you bought the rights.
Yeah.
So Mimela, what happens is that we're just going to split it equally. And since I'm the Bukhar, because even though I sold the rights of the Bukhar, but I'm still technically the firstborn, so I deserve a certain cover that I get to choose which option. So he says, like, Yaakov Avinu, you split everything into two, and I'll choose which option I want. And the Mepharshim said that Yaakov Avinu understood that really Eisav wants the whole thing, and he's sort of trying to get the whole thing in this way. So Yaakov has to figure out exactly what he's going to do. Omar Yaakov said, he hasn't filled his eye from riches. He wants more and more. Also his eye, he hasn't felt satisfied with his riches. So what is Yaakov going to do? What did Yaakov going to do? He split his father's estate into two parts. Everything that his father left over, he put in one section. So like option A is everything that Yitzchak Avinu owned, all his flocks, all his servants, all his everything, all his riches, etc. Option B, Ves Eretz Yisrael l'chelek echad. And there's another gift that says Eretz Yisrael and Maras Hamachpelah v'chelek echad. Maras Hamachpelah is included in Eretz Yisrael, but
goes well with the Chumash.
Why?
Because he wanted to be buried there, Esau.
Yeah. So we'll get to that story, not in this parak, but in the next parak. But we'll touch on that story a little bit today. But so what is Yaakov going to do? He splits everything. He says, okay, so I'll give you two options. Option A, you can have everything that Yitzchak Avinu owned except for Eretz Yisrael. Option B, you can take Eretz Yisrael, just Eretz Yisrael. So what did Eisav do? Met also Eisav. What did Eisav do? Right? It's a good question. I don't know what to do. Should I take Eretz Yisrael or should I take everything else? Right? All the fluid estate, the money and the riches and the servants and the animals, right? Or should I take all that or should I take Eretz Yisrael with the real estate? Eisav didn't know what to do. So what did he do? He went to Yishmael in the desert to get advice from him. Shnemat says the pasuk Vayelech Eisav el Yishmael. Eisav went to Yishmael. Now the problem is there's a bit of a chronological problem over here because Yishmael had already died a good many years earlier. When Yitzchak died, right, well, you can make the cheshbon like this. When Yitzchak died, when Yishmael died, Yitzchak was 127. When it was 100, Yishmael died when he was 137, and Yishmael was 14 years older than Yitzchak. It was over 50 years before Yitzchak died. Yishmael died, so Yishmael was already dead. So how could Eisav go to Yishmael to ask him for advice about what to do over here, how to inherit his life?
He did it beforehand.
You're saying he did it beforehand? It could be.
Beforehand.
Well, if you learn like the Zayis Ranan,
my father died. What should I do? Should I inherit everything?
You're saying he asked him already beforehand. No. If you learn like the Zayis Ranan that we're talking about, where Yitzchak was really still alive, and they're just splitting his property while he was alive because he was blind, and it's as if he was dead, you can hear that a little bit more. But even so, because then this whole story would be like before Yaakov Avinu even went to Haran to get married. That's mashma that this is dafka happening now.
Yeah, it should be when. Yeah. I'm not pretending to be Esau.
Right. Omar Yishmael Akapanim. So it says he went to Yishmael. There's another girsa in the Higger edition of Pirkei Eliezer, which is from Ksav Yad. It says he went to Bnei Shel Yishmael, to Yishmael's son, and that's more or less.
Oh.
That's more or less the Sefer Yasher. Also says he went to Nevoyos ben Yishmael, who was his brother-in-law. The Radal says it should say Bnei Yishmael. Okay, so the idea is that he didn't literally go to Yishmael, he went to a relative of his, a son of Yishmael or something like that.
The chronological problem.
Yeah.
If there are different versions, you say that Dafka at this point is been told differently.
Right. Okay, so what did he say? Yishmael said to Esau like this: the Amorites and the Canaanites are then in the land of Eretz Yisrael. why there were a bunch of nations there. The Radah says, why does it say Amorites and Canaanites? So the Canaanites, because that's like the Spitz, the land of Canaan. They're called Canaan. So the general term is Canaanites, so we call them Canaanites. Right? And then Amorites, the Radah says that Amorites are like the strongest people there. They were the most fearsome. So Yishmael is mentioning both Amori and Canaanian, not necessarily everyone else. The Amorites and the Canaanites are living in land now. And Yaakov, your brother, is confident that he's going to inherit the land. Meaning, I don't really think it's going to happen anyways that you're going to get the land. The Radah says either because they didn't believe in the promise from Hashem, maybe he didn't even believe in Hashem, or he didn't believe in the promise from Hashem, or the word is that Yishmael was assuming that maybe Yaakov was going to do some sort of avera and he'll lose getting his Eretz Yisrael anyways. So Yishmael tells Eisav, look.
Just saying that maybe we have two new players to negotiate with. And then we go and negotiate with him. Okay, we can negotiate with them to not to take to take Israel from Yaakov's hands.
I hear it. It sounds like from the Medrash that Yishmael is telling, or the sons of Yishmael are telling Eisav, look, we're not so confident that Yaakov's actually going to get Eretz Yisrael anyways. This whole Eretz Yisrael thing is not really realistic. So our advice to you is, Ella, rather, what should you do? Take whatever else your father left for you. And Yaakovin won't get anything. You take everything else, leave Eretz Yisrael to Yaakovin, and he won't even get Eretz Yisrael for the reasons we said before, that they didn't believe in it or whatever. And Eisav is going to follow that advice. Eisav took whatever his father had left. Eretz Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael and Maras Bachbela he left over for Yaakov Avinu. And they wrote an eternal document between them, attesting to the fact that Eisav is taking everything for himself and leaving Eretz Yisrael and Maras Bachbela for Yaakov Avinu. And this document that we just mentioned is going to be important in the next parak, in the story of when they were burying Yaakov Avinu and Eisav came along and tried to stop the burial. But that's what happened here. But Omar Yaakov Eisav. So that was the deal, right? So now Yaakov tells Yaakov gets Eretz Yisrael and Eisav gets everything else. Omar Yaakov Eisav. Yaakov said to Eisav, "Leich me'eretz achuzasi me'eretz Canaan. Get out of my heritage land. Get out of Eretz Canaan, because we have this document and it belongs to me now. So now you have to get out." So Eisav took his wives and everything that he had, and he went elsewhere. It says the pasuk, and Eisav went to land. This isn't even the land. Eisav went to land because of his brother Yaakov, and this is a reference to the fact that Eisav left Eretz Canaan and went to a different place and settled over there to Har Seir, where he settled with the Chayri over there and mingled with the Chari, and then he took over. That's Har Seir or Stay Adayim. That became the land of Eisav over there. Now there's an interesting medrash. Actually, it's like a whole bevy of like midrashim and commentaries that talk about this. There's an interesting medrash called Medrash Yilamdenu on this pasuk of Vayelech El Eretz Mepnei Yaakov Achiv, and he brings down in Medrash Yilamdenu that pasuk is talking about something else. Eisav had a grandson named Tzfai. This guy Tzfai was the son of Eliphaz, the son of Eisav. And Tzfai went off to a place called Italy, and he conquered a city called Rome. And he was over there. He was a king in Rome, and he was a very successful general in battles and whatever. And at some point, he was fighting the Aboriginal Rome, Italians, who were probably from Bnei Yafes. We'll have to ask Rabbi Felder about that. They were probably Bnei Yafes, and this guy Tzfai actually lost in war. So there was like a little outpost of Esav's descendants over there in Rome, and this guy Tzfai was their general, their king or whatever, and he lost the war and he got killed. And it says in the Medrash that Eisav went there to Rome to go be Menachem Oval, the family of Tzfai. And that's what it means, Vayelech El Eretz. That Eisav went to the land, it means that he went to Rome to go be Menachem Oval for his grandson who got killed. That's one version of this marriage. And there's a few different. It's brought down in a few different ways, but the Rekech says a slightly different thing about this guy Tzfai. That later was, as I mentioned before, we'll speak in the next parak about when they were going to bury Yaakov Avinu. So Eisav came along and said, "No, I own the rights. Yaakov Avinu shouldn't be buried here in Ras Machpelah." But the Rekech says that this guy Tzfai, the grandson of Eisav, he was over there involved in that scuffle, in that fight. And Yosef, who was the king of Mitzrayim at that point, or at least the viceroy of Mitzrayim, came and captured Tzfai and brought him back to Mitzrayim. And the Rekech says that afterwards, when Yosef HaTzadik died, and the Jews were no longer sort of controlling Mitzrayim, so it was released from prison. I guess it was some sort of political prisoner or something. And he ran away, and he went to Rome, and he captured Rome, and that's how Bnei Esav have their stronghold in Rome. That's another medrash. There's other sources also.
It's very strange.
Yosifun.
You just said that Esav himself
went to stay Edom, to Edom, which is southwest of Eretz Yisrael, not Rome.
Not Rome.
Yosifun.
You just said that he went there to Nachem the family.
Yeah.
So how come? How did it happen before Yosef was?
No, okay, I'm saying no.
The
the midrashim don't necessarily jive with each other. I'm just saying two different midrashim about exactly what happened with this guy Tzfai in Rome. There's a Yosifun, which was a sefer based on Josephus. He says that Rome was started in the time of David HaMelech. Right, so there's a Gemara about it. The Gemara says in Shabbos Taf Nun Vav, the Gemara says that on the day that Shlomo HaMelech married the daughter of Paro, so Gavriel HaMalach came and he took a stick and he stuck it in the sea, and from that stick grew out Italia Shel Yavan, Italy of Greek-in Italy, which became Rome.
There's a reference to this medrash in Brachos, maybe.
It could be.
There's a reference to the Gemara in Shabbos.
It could be.
I remember that.
And there's a Sifri that says that it was when Yerovam ben Avat put up these idols. That's when Rome started. There's other sources that say it was in the time of Yosam Melech Yehuda, Yehoshaphat Melech Yehuda. There are different sources of exactly when Rome was originally built. And I have a way of answering up all these different sources. There's a famous expression we say in English: Rome wasn't built in a day. So each of these midrashim are talking about different stages in the building up of the city, something like that. There's another Nakuda. The Rebbe Reb Heschel in Chanukah Satira, Parshas told us. So in Parshas told us when Yitzchak Avinu is giving a bracha to Esav, so he said to him, "Yishmane Oretz Yeh Meishavecha." From the fattest of the land, that should be your place of dwelling. And Rashi says, "What's the fattest of the land? Should be the place of your dwelling." Zu Italia Shel Yovan. That's referring to Italy. So the question is why Italy of all places in the world? Esav is, they're pretty dominant in a lot of different places in the world. Why did Rashi specifically say in Italy? What's this idea of Italy?
Nice weather.
What?
Nice weather.
Nice weather? Yeah. Actually, I have a friend who's going to Italy tomorrow. In 2 days. He's really going to Maricopa. He's stopping over because he wants to go eat in one of the restaurants in Rome. One of those type of guys.
I'll tell you something.
Off the record.
Off the record. Tell us about the restaurants in Rome.
Oh, off the record.
The kosher ones.
Oh.
The good stuff.
Anyways, so I was once in a milchig Italian restaurant in Yerushalayim, and I'm looking at the menu, and I'm I don't know what any of this stuff is. Fettuccine, what do you call noodles with cheese and tomato sauce? We don't have a name for that, but we could do it for you. Al Capote. So why does Rashi say that this?
Formaggio, fettuccine.
Yeah, I don't know, Mario and Luigi. And
Pomodoro formaggio.
So why does Rashi say that Mishmani Haaretz Yeh Moshevecha is talking about Italy is talking about Italy? What's the point of Italy? So the Chanukah Satira, Rebbe Heschel And the end of the Parshas told us as a word like this. This is because previously Yitzchak had already given a bracha to Yaakov Avinu. He said, Hashem should give you from the dew of the heavens and from the fat of the land. So Yaakov Avinu already gets the fat of the land. He gets all the best of the land, right? So then, how could there be any room for a bracha to give over to Esau? Is there only one bracha that you could give me? And then Yitzchak all of a sudden pulls out another bracha and gives it to Esau. But you already gave over all the best lands to Yaakov Avinu. So how can you give it over to Esau? Says the Rabbi of Heschel, the bracha that was going to Yaakov Avinu was only going onto the lands that had already existed at that time in history. So then, when Yitzchak was giving the bracha to Esau, saying, I'm going to give you a bracha that wasn't included in the bracha that went to Yaakov Avinu. I'm going to give you Italia Shel Yavon, to Italy. Because that didn't exist yet. Because the Gemara Shabbos said that when did Italy start? When the Malach Gabriel stuck a stick in the ocean, when Shlomo Melech married the daughter of Paro, like I just mentioned before, that's when Italy grew. So the land itself didn't exist, so it wasn't included in the original bracha to Yaakov, so it could be included into the new bracha of Esau. Yeah. A little bit weiter. Fine. So basically the point is that Esau leaves Eretz Canaan and he goes to elsewhere, to Edom, maybe to the land of Edom. Perhaps Esau made up also a colony in Rome. And in the reward, as a reward for the fact that Esau had cleared out all his vessels, meaning all of his belongings from Eretz Canaan, because of his brother Yaakov, he left everything and went out and left it all over to Yaakov. Now suddenly, Mea Medinas Mount Seir Ad Magdiel. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave Esav 100 provinces from Seir until Magdiel. What's Magdiel? Shnei, it says in the pasuk, Aluf Magdiel, Aluf Iram. What's Magdiel? Ze Roimi. Magdiel is Roimi, which is Rome. And Rashi says in Chumash also Magdiel is Rome. Also, Targum Anderson also says it over there. Magdiel is Rome. I think Targum Anderson says it. So Yaakov Avinu gave him Rome. Hashem gave to Esav all these brachas because he was so what's the word I'm looking for? Cooperative with Yaakov Avinu. So he got these brachas. He got these 100 provinces, and he got Rome. There's an interesting tshuva that I saw a while ago. It says in the pasuk Aluf Magdiel, right? And we say Magdiel is Rome. So that would imply, at least that you might say that what that means is that at the time that the Torah was written, when Hashem gave the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu, so Magdiel, meaning Rome, already existed, which we said earlier was a shaila when exactly Rome was built, and Rome wasn't built in a day or whatever. But it sounds like Magdiel already existed in the time that the Torah was written by Moshe Rabbeinu, right? So if that's true, comes along the Shalos of Tshuva's Hisayrus Tshuva from the grandson of the Chassam Sefer, the son of the Chassam Sefer. The Shalos of Tshuva's Hisayrus Tshuva. He wants to say a chiddush, so that, and we know that Magdiel. Why is Magdiel Rome? The Targum Anderson says because it has a wall around it and a migdal, right? A wall and a tower. So that's Rome, right? So now, if Rome was called Magdiel because it had a wall and a tower, even in the time of the Torah, that would imply that Rome is a city that's Mukaf Chayma Mimais Yeshua Ben Nun, that it's a walled city from the times of Joshua, which would give it a halachic status of keeping Shushan Purim, which should keep the 15th of Adar, not the 14th of Adar in Rome. So that's what the Shaila Shavas and Saras Chul wants to say, that Rome should keep the 15th day of Adar.
Keep Shushan Purim. The same place.
Huh?
We don't know if that's
Rome has been inhabited continuously. But that's what it's a huge chiddush.
Then it says when.
What?
We don't know.
We don't know. Yeah.
When. So Lamaisa,
it's a huge.
Slightly after Yeshua ben Nun. It's not Shayach.
Yeah, you're right. Lamaisa, it's a huge chiddush. There's a similar chiddush.
According to the Purim halachos, so you would just say you better keep with the rest of the world instead of trying to.
No, so that's also true. In a case of a suffix, if it's Mukaf Chorima, so there's a ran that says that you keep the 14th, not the 15th. So the best if you could, even if you could say at best it's a suffix, you'll still do 14th.
It happens with Tiberius today.
Yeah, there is a chiddush. There's a similar chiddush that the Chai Adam writes that Prague also should keep 2 days misafik. a similar idea, because Prague maybe is a Muk of Chayma because it's an ancient city, something like that.
Today's information.
Of Purim, yeah.
Interesting.
Well, at the time when I first saw this serious tshuva, so I emailed a bunch of Chabad rabbis. I could only find Chabad rabbis in Rome. I emailed 3 Chabad rabbis in Rome, and they all said they never heard of such a thing. Of course, Rome keeps Purim on the 14th day of Adar. One of the rabbis wrote me that the earliest wall that that the archaeologists found of Rome dates to about 600 years after Yeshua ben Nun. The earliest wall.
Really?
That the archaeologists.
It's already very
600
good.
years after Yeshua ben Nun.
I know, but it's already very good. In look for the Medrash.
For the Medrash, it's good. That's like mamish, like the time of like Shlomo Melech.
Forget Yosef. This is incredible.
Why?
It's what's it called? We don't approve the Medrash is a better proof than everything else.
That what?
I'm just saying, again, it's a good that they found something that's so ancient, like that it was really okay.
Okay, I'm saying we knew that Rome was old.
Because on one hand, I'm saying like it's still there's a suffix that Esau was there exactly, or somewhere else, but at least was it's proof that it was very ancient.
Yeah. And that's just when there was a wall. Apparently, beforehand, Rome prided itself on being a city without a wall, that they didn't need a wall to protect themselves because they were so strong. Which sounds so like Eisav.
Look, 600 years after Yeshua ben Nun.
Very Shlomo Melech.
Yeah.
Very Shlomo Melech.
Yeah, we're talking about like roughly 800 years before. What's it called? 800 years.
Before.
Yeah, 800 years before it was the time of Esau.
Yeah.
About.
Okay. It's an interesting thing. I had this emails with correspondence back in 2012 with these rabbis in Rome. Okay, weiter. We'll finish off with a few more lines and we'll stop here. Oz Yosef Yaakov Petach v'Sha'anan. Then Yaakov Avinu settled safe. Not safely, but confidently b'Sha'anan and tranquil be'eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan. Uve'eretz Be'ladatoy, in the land of his birth, Uve'eretz Migurei Oviv, and in the land where his father had lived. Shneimar says the pasuk, Vayeshev Yaakov Be'eretz Migurei Oviv. Yaakov lived in the land where his father had lived. Right, so this is like sort of like the opposite of Avram Avinu. It says Lech lecha me'artzecha me'moladetcha me'beis avicha, and here it's Yaakov is going back to where his father lived, to the place where he was born, etc. So like the opposite of Avram leaving Eretz Yisrael, and we have Yaakov Avinu coming and Mamish settling down in Eretz Yisrael. And we know this is like the opening words of Parshas Vayeshev now. The Vayeshev Yaakov Be'eretz Migurei Oviv, and we know what Rashi says over there in the beginning of Parshas Vayeshev. Bikesh Tzadikim Leisha B'Shalva, Kafetz Aleim Tzaros. The tzaddikim, the righteous people, they want to sit in tranquility and enjoy their olam hazeh and not have to deal with all kinds of distressing issues and whatever. But alas, that is what happens in this world, that Hashem brings upon calamity after calamity. And even though Yaakov is sitting here and he's settled and he came to Eretz Yisrael, and that's like mamish, like the Spitz form, the Spitz life, the Spitz existence. But the unfortunate stories don't stop, and we're going to see next week the next story of Yosef being sold and all the other tzaras that Yaakov will have to go through towards the end of his life. So tune in next time. Same bat time, same bat channel.